Welcome to the Dynamics of Everyday Life, where we demystify some tricky concepts and get to know ourselves a little bit better. Welcome back to the Dynamics of Everyday Life. Today's title comes courtesy of my brother. I can't remember the context, but we were probably being very judgmental about a celebrity, as only siblings can be. And he said, "Well, let's face it, no one looks good in a mohair jumper," and then paused, adding, "And there's a podcast title for you." I love finding ideas for episodes this way. I just then need to create the content around it. Fortunately, we're heading straight towards Christmas and the holiday season at full speed. Now, whilst this might bring a lot of festive cheer and fun, it also might bring a lot of time with our families and inner circles, which also can be fun and can be fraught. Let's be clear here. I don't think there's any family out there living on the equivalent of Waltons mountain who skip through Christmas or any holiday season without so much as a blip in proceedings. We're spending time with people that we don't normally spend huge amounts of time with, often cooped up. Remember lockdown and how that went? And we're overeating, we're over drinking. We're possibly not the best versions of ourselves. When you think about it, it's no wonder that things can happen. And these don't need to be big things. Yes, the divorce rates do tend to be higher after Christmas, but not every argument is going to end up in a trip to the solicitors. It can just result in a tense atmosphere over the mince pies. And this is where we can find ourselves either making or receiving snippy comments. These comments can often seem quite innocuous, and they're either made consciously or unconsciously. So in the example of the mohair jumper comment, I'm imagining a scenario where I'm wearing a mohair jumper. Just for the record, I don't own any, more because they're a nightmare to wash than for stylistic reasons. And someone makes a reference to them being difficult to wear with anything, or that they don't suit many people. So the wearer, in this case me, is left unsure as to why the comment has been made. Is it because what I'm wearing doesn't suit me? Have I made a fashion faux pas? I'd like to think that these happen less these days than when I was a teenager and I thought I looked great in neon fruit print leggings. They're really difficult to carry off, even if you're a supermodel. But the key point here is that something's been said that's undermining you. And at this time of year, a lot of people are extra tired. And so we can feel a bit like a turtle that's been upended with the soft tummy that's being exposed, and we're a little bit more sensitive than we would normally be, and that soft tummy can get bruised quite easily. Sometimes the odd throwaway comment can land more deeply than we realise. Sometimes we say something and we don't realise that it's actually going to impact somebody or hurt somebody quite as much as it does. Sometimes people read more into what somebody's actually saying to them. And sometimes we don't even recognise that we're being unkind. So what's going on here from a psychodynamic point of view? And just to clarify, what I'm talking about here is the unconscious drives behind comments, not the outright unkindness that sometimes can happen. That's willful, and it's really not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the comments that we don't realise will have such an impact, or we don't realise are actually more about us than the person we're talking about. So you won't be surprised to learn there are quite a few defence mechanisms in the mix here. Time to get those bingo cards ready? Actually, that would be a fantastic Christmas game, wouldn't it? Defence mechanism bingo. Or maybe not. That could actually be a bit of a minefield. I'm going to work on that one. I think there's something there. I just haven't quite found it yet. But let's have a think about what we're marking off today. A big one here is projection. So just a quick recap of projection. This is where we split off bits of ourselves that we don't like and we put them into somebody else. So let's say, for example, we're not feeling very happy about the outfit that we've chosen for Christmas Day or a party or a get-together or something. We're feeling a bit frumpy, we're feeling a bit, maybe we've overeaten, we've overindulged. But we don't like that about ourselves, so what we do is we project it into somebody else and we make them feel uncomfortable in what they're wearing or how they are. So this really is about what you're saying and not actually what somebody else is doing or how somebody else is presenting themselves. You're making something that's actually all about you into something that's all about somebody else. And then we've got projective identification, and that's actually where we identify it in ourselves. So what's going on here is we've projected, somebody's projected something into us, and we actually take it and run with it. In the mohair jumper example, we've got the bit where somebody says, oh, no one looks good in a mohair jumper, or mohair jumpers can be very, very difficult to wear. Projecting the bit out of them that they don't like about themselves and that, oh, I'm not comfortable in what I'm wearing. So actually you then, the wearer, in this case me, I take it on board and think, oh, actually, should I not be wearing this? Oh, I don't feel comfortable now in what I'm wearing. This wasn't a good outfit choice. So that's projection and projective identification. And this is happening a lot in these scenarios where you can see it bandied around a lot at this time of year. The bits that we don't like about ourselves put into somebody else, and that person then carries it around with them. Now, what can happen here is that somebody then snaps. Somebody makes a comment, and the other person anticipates a meaning behind that comment, and they snap back. So the person who's made the original comment can actually deny that they've done anything wrong in making the comments, if they feel that actually what's happened is, well, I was just making a comment. Why are you taking this so personally? You can see how this happens, can't you? You can see how this then becomes a great big thing, and people are starting to feel unhappy. Defences get riled up at this point. We can remember that defence mechanisms are activated when we experience or perceive some form of threat. We get anxious about some form of threat, and so this is when we're going to start to become defensive, and we're also going to deny our behaviour. We're going to deny that we've done anything wrong because we don't want to feel that we've done anything wrong. We're also more likely to withdraw and isolate ourselves from other people. We've talked before about isolation being a defence mechanism in how we speak. So what's happening here is we'll split topics away from others in our speech so as not to contaminate them between each other. But it can also be a behaviour. So we don't want to come into any form of contact with what's impacted us. We might, if we experience somebody as projecting something into us that we don't like or we feel uncomfortable around, one of the things that we can do is we can actually withdraw from that person's company because we don't want to be part of that. So, as I've said, remember, defence mechanisms are there to protect us from anxiety. And if we're feeling unsure about the comments that are made, this is a clear way that's going to induce anxiety. And our defences are going to be very much on the alert and looking out for them. So we isolate ourselves in a bid to protect ourselves from what's happening. When you think about it this way, it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? I don't want something to happen, so I'm going to keep myself away from it. So what can we do about this? As always, awareness is absolutely key here. A phrase that I heard early on in my coach training was, what you say is all about you, what I hear is all about me. And whilst there were a lot of pretty trite comments bandied around in my first coach training, I really like this one because I think it's very true. So if somebody drops a comment that you don't like very much or instills a response in you, remember that you have control over what you do next. It's all about how you feel in the moment. Remember, it's very possibly a projection of something they don't like about themselves. The words that we use can have way more power than people actually realise. So I will share with you an example from this week. I went shopping with my daughter. We went to Blue Water it was a Sunday in December. I'm not sure it's something I'd ever repeat. And I was wearing my glittery diamante leggings. These were a sale purchase from last year. I hadn't worn them so far because they are pretty Christmassy. And a couple stopped me and asked me where I'd got them from. And they said, they're just awesome. They are absolutely incredible. And this made my weekend. My daughter was like, that's made you really happy, hasn't it? And I was like, absolutely, it's made me really happy. This quick comment from this couple perked me up no end. Likewise, if someone had told me I'd look terrible, I'd have probably carried that around with me for days too. My invitation to you this week is to consider where in your life you might be likely to be on the receiving end of such comments. Or, and this can be quite hard to hear, making them yourself. What's going on here? If you're the recipient, how can you protect yourself? What boundaries do you need to put in place? Quick top tip, setting boundaries isn't aggressive. Being clear and calm about what's okay for you and what isn't okay for you is much more easily taken on board by other people than a raging response. I do speak from experience on this one. If you've realised from listening to this episode that you might be making them, what's going on for you? What aren't you happy about in that moment? How can you support yourself more? When we're making these comments, I'm pretty sure it's not because deep in our hearts we're unkind people. It's because something's not right for us. So think about what you need in these moments. And as always, give yourself some grace. We've all been in this position, both making the barbed comments and receiving them. None of us are perfect, and at this time of year especially, we can find ourselves reacting in a way that we wouldn't normally do. Looking at ourselves at this level can be challenging and unnerving as we develop our awareness, so I'd always encourage that you do this at your own speed. If you feel you need some extra help around this, then I've put together a PDF resource sheet and you can find the link for this in the show notes. If you'd like to have a chat with me about psychodynamics or whether I'm the right coach, supervisor or mentor for you, then click on the link that's also in the show notes. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Dynamics of Everyday Life. Please hit the follow button for future episodes and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me on Instagram at The Dynamics of Everyday Life or find me on LinkedIn at Julia Rogers. I'd love to hear from you and hear your thoughts on dynamics. The Dynamics of Everyday Life is brought to you by Coaching 42 and the fabulous team at the Podcast Boutique.